Hey everybody, I'm Jay Jones,
And I'm LT.
and we are the Dose Offensive Gentlemen. Now let's talk about some shit. Hey everybody, welcome back to the DOG, and today we have, man, we're drinking a pretty good whiskey right now. I think LT's on his second glass, and I'm about halfway through my first.
I think I'm okay because I think I could still talk normally now.
Yeah, we'll see by about halfway through. See how you're doing. Halfway falling out the chair and everything.
I don't get that bad. Well, at least we got a little bit smarter now. We kept the bottle downstairs because when we bring the bottle up, we tend to drink more. So
More than what?
well, drink more than we should. when
That's
recording a
incorrect. That's
podcast.
incorrect. That's incorrect. I do not agree with that
I
sentiment.
think we need to find the perfect balance of whiskey intake to podcast recording.
The answer is all of it.
I don't know because that could lead to just mumbling.
Yeah, it absolutely could. Anyway, so today on Bartender Weekly, we are drinking Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve Blended Scotch Whiskey. This is actually, I think it's really tasty.
It is.
So before we get into what we think of it, from the JohnnyWalker.com website, the website explains or describes the whiskey as our creamy blend of Speyside and Highland whiskeys with a touch of West Coast embers, renowned for its delicate honey notes and gentle oak and smoke finish. Now, I think that's definitely kind of what we get here. Then a little further down, they start talking about the blend. Now, the Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve is known for its creamy smoothiness. It opens a luxurious burst of delicate nectar and gentle smokiness that develops into sweet fruits and deeper, velvety, honeyed tones before giving way to sublime, lingering whispers of smoke and oakiness in the finish. I feel like I should just take my clothes off at this point. Like, I feel
Please
like they're
don't.
just trying to seduce me with all these luxurious words.
Don't do it. Don't.
Well, I'll wait till you leave,
Yes.
and then I'll just bathe myself in Johnnie Walker.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing with Johnnie Walker is, I guess it's probably more well known than the other scotches that we drink because, you find Johnnie Walker anywhere. It has a very big history and many types of variations, but this is actually the first time in many years of drinking Johnnie Walker that I've actually drunk a gold label. I've drinking the red label, I've drinking black label, green label, drunk
The blue label is really nice
blue label, expensive, but it was really nice.
for a reason. Expensive
Yeah.
for a reason, though.
No, it is definitely. I mean, where we're at, it's about 200 $200 a bottle. And I bought a bottle because I wanted to enjoy myself, and had platinum label as well. But this is actually the first time I've ever tried gold label.
Yeah, it does not disappoint, though. It is really
No.
good, I think.
And Johnnie Walker's usually a safe bet. It's like if you really can't go wrong grabbing a bottle of Johnnie Walker. I mean, granted, different whiskey drinkers will have different tastes, but if you're going somewhere or you just need a whiskey to drink, you really can't go wrong with a Johnnie Walker.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that because just the taste, it's not heavy on the peat or smoke. It's not,
They're really smooth.
it's not too smooth, but it has a nice. I don't want to say grit, but like it's definitely creamy and a little sweet. But it definitely it feels like a whiskey.
Yeah.
Definitely feels like a whiskey. But it doesn't have like the Islay feel. Like it doesn't have that peat or smoke.
Yeah, well, it's a
with there.
Speyside. Well, it was said it's a mix of
Highland and
Speyside.
Speyside.
Yeah, so I with that blend, I wouldn't expect the peatiness, and this one has like a hint of smokiness. It does really play up the honey notes in it,
Yeah, definitely.
and so I think that in that creamy flavor. So I think that's this will definitely be a good choice. I'm probably gonna pick up a bottle of this myself here soon.
I think this would be really good for like a flask carry.
Ooh,
Right? Because
Yeah.
then you know how typically I know when I go out, like if I carry a flask, it typically becomes the party flask.
Yeah.
And so I know that if I have, Johnnie Walker, like people around me are going to like that besides like the specialty whiskeys, like the Isleys and things like that.
Well, and for me, Johnnie Walker is my traveling whiskey. So if I'm gonna go somewhere where I'm gonna, did I show you my gigantic flask I got for Christmas?
You told me about it.
Oh yeah, it fits a whole bottle. It's huge.
Yeah,
It's huge.
1.75.
It says, oh yeah, it fits the
Wow.
whole bottle with room to spare. It's huge. So I got that for Christmas, and but generally when I travel, whether it's by train or plane, if I'm putting something in my flask, it's generally Johnnie Walker. I usually go with black or green, and like you said, yeah, it usually happens that it becomes the party flask you're passing around. And if I don't want people drinking all my good shit, I don't usually feel bad if I share my Johnnie Walker because it's reasonably priced and it's pretty decent whiskey.
Yeah, definitely. And also looking through the Johnnie Walker website, there is a ton of different labels they make and types,
Oh yeah.
which is actually really surprising because not too many distilleries make a large variety. Not like Johnnie Walker, but I think Johnnie Walker is just on that next tier platform where they can manufacture like anything.
Yeah, so I used to remember tales of partying. I used to I hear from my in-laws and stuff like that about partying Jamaica. They my father-in-law, when he used to throw parties, he would order cases of drinks, of different drinks, and when you came, that was you would get a bottle. You didn't have to go pour guys. You had your own bottle to walk around and drink. And one of the things they used to serve all the time that was always present at his parties, besides Ray and Nephew rum, was some label of Johnnie Walker.
Damn right. You got to have that on stock, though. You have to.
Oh, of course. I mean, you can't go. And I also remember too. I always thought it was fun because watching old movies, and since I started drinking scotch, and get into whiskeys, I started watching some older movies, and I always noticed like one of the scotches that was always present. And, when you used to see bars and stuff like that, there was always a Johnnie Walker present. Even
yeah,
recently.
yeah, definitely. They've been a huge brand for quite some time.
Right, yeah. Even recently in the what was the man called the Man from U.N.C.L.E. Movie that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, with Henry Cavill.
Yeah, and Army Hammer. Is his name Army Hammer?
Arnie Hammer.
Arnie Hammer.
Yeah.
But I busted up laughing when he pulled out the Johnnie Walker.
Classic stereotype.
Mainly because I was in the theater with a flask drinking Johnnie Walker. I was like, yeah, we got the same taste.
I'm just like you, man. I'm just like you. Yeah, so a little bit about Johnnie Walker. Johnnie Walker is a brand of Scotch whiskey now owned by Diageo that originated in the Scottish town of Kilmarnock. I know that's exactly how I would say that word, but I know it's not said that way. It's probably like Kilmarnock.
When we go to Scotland, we're gonna have to record people. We're gonna hey, we do a podcast and we drink a lot of scotch. Although we need to start.
How do you say this town?
How do you pronounce this town correctly? And then we're just gonna have a sound bite. So when we start talking about it, we're just gonna play. Oh, so this scotch is coming from the shore.
That didn't sound like.
That didn't sound like. The only Scottish I know, accents I know, I can't do a Sean Connery or anything. The closest I could get is a Scrooge McDuck. So that's what we're gonna go with.
We're gonna leave it at that. Johnnie Walker originated in the Scottish town of Kilmarnock, East Ayrshire. The brand was first established by grocer John Walker. It is the most widely distributed brand of blended Scotch whiskey in the world, sold in almost every country, with annual sales of the equivalent of over 223.7 million 700 milliliter bottles in 2016. That is 1.56 million liters. That is a fuck ton of whiskey. That's a fuck ton of whiskey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so So, also in keeping with the Dos Offensive Gentlemen tradition of toast, I have a special toast, and it is actually relevant to today's podcast. You will see later on why. But ladies and gentlemen, this is to the long straight piece in Tetris.
Cheers. That's good. That's good stuff.
So definitely creamy.
Very creamy.
I like that. I like how it's not a light taste; it's full bodied. It definitely has a little bit of nuts, a little bit of honey, but it's
No,
not it's
I
not
think that's
overbearing.
a lot of honey because like that's usually the honey notes is like the main thing I taste from this.
Yeah,
Pulling it down and hit the, and it seems to wash the whole way even when I let it go and hit the back of my throat. You could taste that honeyness of it. The nuttiness to me is a little bit, not too much, but that the honey is the main thing I get.
yeah. I think it's just like so smooth. I think it's like really, really smooth. Sometimes when I drink whiskey, it goes down like gravel, And those are the whiskeys I normally stay away from. But those are like the 45+%.
Yeah, the stuff that
ABV.
you can use to sterilize medical equipment.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I will drink that neat, please.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing too, because I mean, both of us. A lot of people will blend or mix Scotch. I guess both of us are not real blended or mixed drinkers, so we prefer the neatness of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like we don't mix. I actually we very rarely we even do that. We very rarely do the drop of add water to the Scotch as well. Usually,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we usually do that as we're already drunk, but but no, I mean, I think to really enjoy the whiskey, especially for this effect, is you have to drink it straight. Drink it as it comes in the bottle, as it's presented, and I think at that point you can kind of get much more of the undertones, more of what the distillers were trying to get you to taste with each different label or each different mix. I think it's important that you kind of appreciate each piece of a drink. Like I really do actually like cocktails, but I don't like the Jack and Coke cocktails. I like the old fashions, the martinis, those things.
I
like
am
I
a
like
martini man.
Oh, absolutely. Like like an actual cocktail, like the sidecars, things like that.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy those. We'll have to get those on the podcast sometime, but I feel like you have to appreciate each part of the cocktail individually in order to really appreciate how they all come together, because they have like a thing called like the mixologist. Yeah, like it's the new barman, right? It's like no, it's a guy who knows how to make drinks is what it is. Like who actually knows how to make a fucking drink. So you have those guys who are coming up with new ways to make drinks or making up new drinks or redoing old drinks or whatever. But
well, I guess for me, it's thing is because even growing up, I mean, my affinity has always been to drink liquor straight. Um, you know, well, my drinking days go for a long time ago. I drink. I started as a wee lad, but I never was really one to like mix things. So like when I did start drinking heavily and looking for my drink. I started off with brandies, with the cognacs, and I'm here at Scotch, but I kind of stayed away from a lot of mixed drinks except for like martinis. I always like martinis. I do like old fashions, especially the ones we had at that one place where the bomb.
yeah, the Australian restaurant bar. Oh man, we sat there just had like 5 rounds.
I know that was.
I'm so glad we had a DD.
Yeah, exactly. She wasn't, but we were. But no, I always appreciate. I always feel that if you should appreciate what they're trying to do. Like vodka, I even drink. Even though I'm not a big vodka man, I will prefer to drink vodka straight than having it mixed with anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. But typically, if I'm gonna have a vodka, it's in the martini. Like very typically, like I don't do vodka tonics really. Well, I do vodka tonics. Like if I'm taking a cruise and I just want something to sip throughout the day, but it's not like um, it's not like a casual drink, or it is a casual drink, but it's not like something that I'm going to look forward to. You
Well,
know what I'm
see,
saying? Like
yeah.
it's the that is like my liquor equivalent of a Corona.
Well, so I'll tell you something that I like, as far as vodka wise. That like people, I like super cold, ice cold vodka with freshly cracked black pepper.
I'd have to try that sometime.
Yeah, it's actually really really good, and we're definitely gonna bring this on the show. But my favorite vodka right now is Parliament. It's a very smooth milk filtered vodka, and it's one of the ones that I was like, I can go through some vodkas and take it or leave it. This one is like, yeah, I'm taking it. This is my bottle. There are
Yeah.
many like it, but this is mine.
Very good to know. And also, if anybody there at home has any recommendations for us to drink here, give us a shout out. Let us know. Until that happens, I'm just gonna pull whatever I have out the cabinet.
Well, we also have a place with a lot of scotch.
Again, yes. And so that's my entire cabinet. So I have lots of scotch to go through.
See, my problem is I don't keep a cabinet. I mean, I try to, but I keep drinking everything.
I would say that sounds like a problem, but I'm a little envious at this point.
I literally over the Christmas break was given whew, like 25 bottles of liquor, asking me how many are left.
How many are left?
12.
That's
12,
impressive. That's impressive.
12. Well, it's not just to be fair, it is not just me. It's not just me drinking all this. My wife is also a lush. So we are both working on that. And then my daughter, my oldest, is a lush as well. So we put a big dent in our.
I see it. I see a trend here. I think I
Oh.
really see a trend.
No, we see some people drink. We drank. we
with
drank.
With an A, goddammit, with an A.
We drank. But see, the thing is, I always felt it was weird in the U.S. that they had the drinking age at 21, and me growing up outside the U.S. where you start drinking legally at 16. I always felt was better because by the time you go to school, you're already, I guess, acclimated. You know what your limits are. You know what you like and stuff like that. So when you're off and being an adult, like a lot of kids in the U.S. when they get to college and you hear about all this binge drinking and stuff like that because it's the first time they're actually really can do it and indulge in it. So a lot of times they don't know their limits and and they go overboard. But here and many other places I lived in around the world, because kids are grow up or people grow up drinking all the time. It's not taboo. They don't try to hoard it. They don't try to binge drink and stuff like that. So you have less instance of people hurting themselves. And one of the things that was very telling about that is when we dropped my daughter off to school, and she goes to school in France. But the thing was the other American students that were coming over here to go to school, when they were released and they realized, oh, I could buy alcohol. You saw them coming out the stores with just bags and boxes of just filled to the brim of whatever alcohol they can carry. And it was like they were just happy as a clam, like, woohoo, we're gonna go get fucked up and da da da. And my daughter always talks about how she feels like the mother hen when she goes out because she knows her limit, she knows what she drinks, but her friends always get shit faced, and she's usually the one that's carrying them home.
Well, I think that says a lot about the culture between U.S. and Europe. Alcohol is so ingrained in many countries of Europe where it's a staple. And, it kind of like how it is in America, but it's less celebrated. I would say that they have festivals and things like that in Europe where they have Oktoberfest, they have wine walks, they have so many different festivals or opportunities that celebrate the drinking of alcohol, whether wine or beer or whatever. But it's not to the point to
Well,
celebrity that Budweiser and Coors and all these large beer manufacturers or beer brewers make in the U.S. Like, it's not on that level where it's like, oh, I'm 21 now, I'm gonna go get fucked up, and it's just like, no, it's these kids have been like exposed to it for so long to where it's no longer new.
Yeah, but it's also the difference too. Like if you look at it in the States, remember you have the commercials like, oh yeah, have a party. It's time to go have a party, and cure Coors Light, and the women partying and everything like that. It was all around like party around the booze, the beer, the da 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 da. Here it's more like, you know what, you're going to go party. Is this drinking is just normal part of everyday life. So, it's not as taboo. It's not like you don't go, even though they have a lot of festivals around, drinking wine fest and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you're doing this because you're celebrating something, but the drinking is just a normal part of it, because you're going to drink you drink every day, you drink like it's nothing.
Yeah.
But it's so when you grow up, like even with me, like when I grew up and I was at the lake, like I didn't know there was a different legal age to buy booze when I was in the States, because it was like I could always buy booze.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teenager, I could go out and buy whatever. I could go out and buy beer when I was 16, and then I had to wait a little bit later to buy harder alcohol, but it was still available. If someone gave me brandy or cognac or something, even when I was like 16, 17, it was not taboo. It was like that was just normal. And then 18, you could buy whatever you want. But it wasn't until I went back to the States and they're like, oh, you have to be 21 to buy alcohol. And I'm like, I've been drinking all this time. I was like, why do I have to wait, artificially 2 more years to, drink this stuff?
Yeah, and I really hope that changes. But I think like an entire cultural shift will have to change with that. Kind of like the whole mindset of people. But but that's racist. Whatever.
Ageist.
Ageist. No. I was right. Racist, because that's going to bring us into our first topic of the podcast.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Apparently now, if you are an American that does yoga, you are subscribing to white supremacy.
Well, I was going to say, hold up, paleface. If you're white and do yoga, because I think us darkies can still do yoga. I don't know.
I don't know. Can you?
I don't know, because
I've never seen that though. That's what I'm saying.
So
like I bet people can, but I've never seen it.
Well, see, apparently there's this minority memo that goes out that tells you what people can and cannot do, and for some reason I keep missing it.
You must have got off the distro list.
I probably, because sometimes I like sit there and they're like, oh, we're not supposed to do that. I'm like, what? When like they had a boycott of Target. I'm like, when were we boycotting Target? I didn't get that memo. But
yes, folks, you heard me right when I said that yoga is racist. So according to the independent.co.uk website, Americans who practice yoga, quote, contribute to white supremacy, claims Michigan State University professor. Religious studies professor Sharina Gandhi argues the practice has flourished in the U.S. from the cultural void of white society. I will put this down in the description, but it is just like a big the fuck? Like what? Like me being on a mat and stretching is racist? How is that?
It's pants on head retarded. That's what it is. I mean, so here's the history. Or you can sit there and look at the history of yoga as far as the West. So previous to generally when yoga was brought into the Western society, it was usually the domain of hippies, right? So like in the 50s, 60s, and even in the 70s, if you found someone who did yoga, they were generally some hippie living on some ashram and some commune somewhere, and it was a hippie practice. And to be honest, if you really want to be fair, and this is why people need to actually understand history and what's going on, it was actually Indian Americans actually pushed for more yoga to be accepted mainstream. And in the 80s is when yoga really blew up in Western cultures because they were pushing it for the health benefits that it brings. And it was to show that, hey, Indian people are really smart because a lot of things a lot of things from India were actually kind of, cherished. I know some people were like, it was appropriated. Shut the fuck up. They were actually cherished. I mean, the biggest one, other than curry, was the Kama Sutra. That was passed around,
Yeah. So
especially.
now anyone who has sex in weird positions is a racist as well for cultural appropriation.
Yeah,
That's our move. You can't do that.
yeah, but in the in the during the sexual revolution, the Kama Sutra fueled a lot of that because it was like, oh, look how enlightened the Indian people are because they actually have a manual that teaches you about relationships, and a big part about that is about sex.
Oh yeah.
And it was all very colorful and romanticized, like they called the vagina the perfume mouse and stuff like that. It was all this so sexy thing, and it filled the revolution. So it was like it brought more people to explore Indian culture outside their own, which makes this shit look crazy because at first there's people who want you to share their culture with you. And now, and that was a big push coming up, especially when I was growing up. Everyone was like, oh, check out this culture, check out this culture, check out this culture. Ooh, check out this culture. Now they're all like, no, don't do that. That's racist.
Well, no. It's not that. It's that you still have to know and acknowledge their culture. You just cannot enjoy anything from it.
Well, yeah. Which is funny because it never goes the other way, right?
No, it never does.
It never goes the other way.
People love the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
People love the internet.
People love jeans. People like cellular phones. People like a lot of things that came from. If you're gonna be actually honest, a lot of the creature comforts we have today come from white Western culture.
How's that light bulb working?
Yeah, it's true. It does. I mean, come on now. Like even generating electricity and stuff like that is like a lot of that comes from white Western culture. And if you want to talk about contributions world, if we want to respect everything and talk about it, you have to also respect it both ways. You can't sit there and go, "Oh, yoga is racist," while I'm typing on my keyboard and on my computer and posting it on the internet. I'm like, well, it just seems weird to me. We can talk about white supremacy. We could talk about the bad things that people do, and I'm not here, saying that we need to erase negative things that happen. But you also have to remember positive things that happen as well as the negative things that happen by other cultures. I'm not a person to try to play pin to tail on who is the worst person out there because everyone has done some heinous shit and everyone has contributed to our society or as we progress through the history. So this whole backlash now to act like everything you guys are doing this is this culture. Well, it's culture appropriation. Oh, you're doing this is racist. Dude, shut the fuck up.
Well, see, I could see so I don't like the argument of cultural appropriation at all. Like I think that it is by far one of the weakest arguments, and it has zero logic as far as especially being in a capitalist society. But so the only argument I could even logically entertain is someone outside of a culture literally making a profit off of that culture, right? So like say a white guy owns an Indian casino. You see what I'm saying? Like that's the only thing. But then it's like capitalism. Like he saw a market, he saw a business, he grew the business. Now he's making money. Like, well, why is that a problem, right? So make your own.
So all right. So many people say that cultural appropriation is when you take another's culture and you
enjoy it. You love
enjoy it, and you don't acknowledge where it comes from. And I'm like, no one does that ever. No one does that. There is not a culture. You cannot tell people, because remember, rewind. There was a couple of months back or so when they were like, if you eat sushi, that's cultural appropriation. I'm like, well, my sushi is made by, Jesus in the back. So, talk to them. Oh, wait. No, we didn't mean you. We just meant the white people who eat sushi. All right,
Yeah.
then shut the fuck up.
Oh, well, it's always targeted though.
Oh, it's
Like
always against
it's
white
not
people.
minorities as a whole are always right now um in the I guess you could say in the right or always validated in the cultural appropriation eyes because it's one community is the minority community versus the majority, which at this point is quickly becoming a minority. And I say that as the terms of all minorities outweigh
The majority.
the majority.
Yeah, well, the problem I have with a lot of this framework is that it's always like non-white versus white, right? And to me, that
oh
seems
yeah, that's my problem too.
yeah. Well, of course, D white man. No, but it's like it. The reason I hate that comparison so much is that it actually erases the different cultures, right? So all minorities are all cultural groups are not the same. If you try to make everything everyone else, Asians, Hispanics, I hate even saying Hispanics, but Asians, black people, stuff like that against the white man is like, okay, that's kind of you're kind of ganging up on someone because what you're doing is you're putting all us in this one category where we have differences amongst ourselves and things that are good and bad amongst ourselves and things that need to be celebrated amongst ourselves against one. And they always paint white people as one monolith, like every white person is the same. And it's like, no, that's not even true because you take you take a British person, you take a Russian, you take a Spaniard because Spanish people are white.
Yeah.
You take you take an Italian, you take a Greek or something like that.
Israeli,
you put them,
yeah.
Well, Israeli, we can argue about that one too.
They're pretty light skinned.
Well, they tend to turn white when they're in the United States, but when they're in Israel, you can't. It's very. If you've ever been to Israel around real Israeli people, it is kind of hard to distinguish them from Arabs. It really is.
I believe that.
Yeah, it really is the try to distinguish. Like if you put an Israeli and a Palestinian side by side, I guarantee you, you're gonna have a hard time telling which is which.
Yeah, I mean, those two cultures and everything are so closely intertwined that
yeah,
it's essentially like fighting amongst themselves.
They're more separated by religious ideology than actual genetics. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But again, so but you take like if you were going to take like Armenians and stuff like that, you take all these different Caucasian people and put them together, they're going to be very, very diverse. So to sit there and say, oh, it's black people, and that's with any race too, because even with black people, you take a black person from United States, you take one from England, you take one from Southeast Asia because there's black people there. Yeah. You take them from Africa, and all this stuff like that.
And what about the Dominican republics and the Caribbeans?
Yeah.
Like that's a whole.
Or what do you talk about the Aborigine? Because think about it. Aboriginals and they some of them blonde hair, blue eyed, right? You don't find those like marsupials. You don't find those anywhere else. You only find them in one area, but they would be considered black. Anywhere else. So if you take all those people, that's a very diverse group. So when you started to put, all these minorities, or where they were like people of color versus white people, I'm like, that's really unfair because you're lumping all these people together who have their own differences versus another group who is very diverse within itself. And to me, that just seems it just seems dumb to do because you're more erasing things so you have a way just so you can bitch instead of celebrating differences, which most of these people claim that's what they want.
Well, they want to celebrate the differences when it benefits them, but we both know that by essentially pushing all the whites that you described into one category and all the other minorities into another category, you're much when you do that argument, it's much easier to create the narrative that whites are the oppressors as a whole, and the minorities are the victims, and that's hugely what the left is becoming.
Well, because they introduced this thing called the progressive stack, where you try to rack and stack everybody based off of, what level they think they're victims of.
And
And
that is like,
right.
get the fuck out of here, because that is
But
like damaging and damaging and
but the
damaging
funny
to
part
itself.
about that, when you start dealing with this, a lot of these people who hold these beliefs as ideology, is that it's funny. They'll sit there and talk about, like, the oppression and stuff like that, and it's like, well, okay, then the Jews step up and go, hey, in recent history we had it the worst,
Yeah.
and then they'll sit there and go, but you're not that oppressed because you guys are white.
Yeah, and you actually took yourself out of it.
Yeah,
Right.
and you're out of it.
And I had the discussion actually very recently. Is you have let's take the right now the two main groups that we talked about, the black people and the Jews, right? So who is still claiming reparations, or that they want to be given some kind of leniency or forgiven for their past, or they want something that they themselves did not they want to be rewarded for what they themselves did not have to go through. And it's the blacks. Like blacks very stereotypically are still demanding reparations, are still saying, like, because slavery, it's racist and everything. It's not really a thing.
Well, see, and that's a very, 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 very touchy subject for me because, on one hand, my parents raised me, and I wholeheartedly believed in the idea of meritocracy, right?
Absolutely, I think we both do.
Yeah, and and I remember, and my parents just told me to say, like, as a black man growing up, you're gonna have to work a lot harder, than other people to make it. My mom used to always say you have to be better than the average black man to make it, and as much as people will probably take issue with that. I was like, no, I understood that. I understood that I'm going to have to put effort into my merits. I mean, effort in there to come up, and I did. I grew up pretty successful. I'm very happy with what I did with my life and everything else, and I instill that in my kids. So I am not one of this victim mentality. I don't believe anyone owes me anything. I need to show that I believe that I had to work to earn the respect to show that I'm worthy of giving these things. I don't want a handout. I want you to show that, hey, I deserve to be here, because I'm capable of doing this job, not because of some pity party or something like that. Now, I granted, coming up, in the early times, the 50s, 60s, and stuff like that, where we were going through the civil rights movement, some things need to be done to make way for people to come up, and get these opportunities. But, looking at that now, 50 years, actually going on 60 years past those times, we have the opportunities. We literally do have the equality of opportunities, but fewer of us are recognizing it and taking advantage of those opportunities. And we're allowing minority voices out there to shout and say, we're still oppressed. We're still in it. And I'm telling you right now, if you are living in America today, and the idea that you are oppressed and there's so many things that are holding you back is fallacious. You literally have the opportunity to make something of yourself, but you have to apply. You have to do it. And the reason I often pick this out is because to sit there, okay, black people have been in America since its foundation, all right? Since its foundation. We've been there to help build and strengthen America. It has not been, so essentially we do have a lot of head start. I often tell, a lot of people, especially black Americans, you are more American than African, especially when I speak a lot of, like, oh man, we need to go back to motherland. It's like, dude, I go to Africa all the time. You are not you're not African, you're American. But it's good to go over there and see where your roots are at. But you have very little in common with Africans. Africans come up speaking several different languages. They depending on where they come from, because Africa is huge as a continent, and different countries face different types of hardships, right? You had you had Darfur, in the Sudan. You had the Janjaweed that was literally wiping out other Africans.
Yep. You had the Rwanda incident.
You have the Rwanda incidents. You had the famines in Ethiopia. So depending where you came from in Africa, you face different things. In America, you don't face those things. You really don't. You don't face those hardships. And the thing that illustrates this a lot is that Africans that come over to the United States, by and large, tend to, and on an average household income, make more than white people. They tend to make more than white people. They tend to go to schools. They tend to go to Ivy League schools more. They are, they do very well. So to sit there and think, hey, America's so racist, is holding down so many minorities. It's always amazes me that how do you say that when minorities, especially on average income, success, education, and stuff like that, actually outdo white people.
Yeah, and I completely agree with pretty much every sentiment you just threw out there. Um, so I have at least two things I want to address with like your little monologue. One was we both heavily agree on the 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 topic of equality of opportunity, not the equality of outcome.
Yes.
And I think that's a big difference because that's what you're seeing a lot with like the left. Like currently now, like there is far and wide, essentially in America, equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
Far and
most
wide,
definitely.
like there really is. But what is what is the contested point is equality of outcome, which obviously, if you put different numbers in the formula, you're going to have a different outcome. So if you work harder, if you work more hours, if you have a different pay, if you have different background, things like that, you could make more or less than somebody else.
Yep.
Now, if you think that you are worth more than what you're being paid, it is your responsibility to speak up and ask for that raise or to divert and go start your own business and make however much you can.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm a big believer in that, like equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. And not Russell, Jordan Peterson has a really good detail on that. I'll try to link that if I can find it down in the description. But also the one thing I also liked that you said was Black Americans. I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine who they tried to say that they were African American, and I was like, okay, where are you from? Oh, from Trinidad. Oh, well, where's that? Like, where in Africa is that? It's one of those things. Like, I see if you're within one or two generations or something like that, but typically if you are if you cannot trace back your heritage to Africa, like you're American, you just happen to be black. That's kind of like my thought process on that is,
Well, I mean, due to slavery, it made it harder for people to trace back where it's come. But I think when I say that is because it's more of a cultural thing, right? If you grew up in the Americas, especially in the U.S. or even in Canada, or Britain, I'll even put British people in there. If you grew up in these and then Britain is more closer to Africa than America is. If you grew up in these cultures and that was your life for generations, you are to say that you're African. I often say it's better to say you're of African descent than to say like, oh, I'm African American, because you're not really African. You share nothing. Most Black Americans share absolutely no connections culturally with Africa, like within the food you eat, the dress, the what you wear, and this, one of the funny things I used to always, wonder about was that, there was this big push about, getting back into more Afrocentric things. We used to have the dashikis, the kente cloths, and all that stuff. They push really hard, but when I went to Africa, I didn't see that. I didn't see the dashikis. I didn't see the kente cloths. I saw them trying to act more like us, like Black Americans, more than I saw that. So I always found it weird that Black Americans try to act like Africans when the Africans were trying to act more like Black Americans. And it's a more of a cultural thing than really one of, and I think we need to understand that identity and understand the difference in Black people by where they grew up. around the world. Because if you're a black person, and people don't know this, but there was a lot of black people, a lot of Africans, or a lot of black people in Germany that grew up, and even underneath the Nazi rule, there were black Nazis during that time. Granted that that doesn't mean that Hitler liked black people. He's just saying they were there, and there were black people, and they were actual that served under the Nazi regime. So they're going to have a different upbringing and cultural experience than others, and I think that's why I hate that whole grouping everybody into one thing, because there's so much diversity even within a race.
Yes, we fully agree on that. To be honest with you, we got to move on, man. Fuck, it's getting
Alright.
late. It's getting late. So,
Yoga.
yeah. So
do
yoga
yoga all
is
you
racist.
want.
Yoga is racist.
We don't really give a fuck.
Especially when you start doing the downward facing dog. I feel like that is the highly racist towards me.
Well, that's because you have no ass. Now people with ass, I think it's better. I would rather. I would say this, especially to women, because I'm a big sexist. If you have a good ass, a fine ass, I want you to do more yoga. You need to do more yoga. We need more downward facing dogs. I appreciate you. If you don't have an ass.
Yeah, and I don't think that they really like it when I wear my yoga pants to the supermarket. Okay, I got you. All right, so moving on. So there's also another topic that also kind of is I don't even know how to describe it, but if you're if you're a fan of F1 Formula One racing, you've probably seen the grid girls, right? And Formula One has now banned grid girls completely from the sport. And, the grid girls blame feminists for this, which I can kind of see because this, I think that this is the next step to the cheerleaders are going to be gone from sports, and all the dancers and all the kind of the female entertainment types. Like, hey, you look good, so I can enjoy looking at you. I think that's going to be all going away because they're viewed by feminists, not by anyone else, by feminists to be an exploitation of themselves.
So
when I feel like it's a job, and if these women want the job, they can take it, they can leave it, but if they know what is expected of them and they adhere to that, at that point it's between two consenting adults, the employer and the employee.
Well, and here's the thing too. One of the things I really hate about this new quote unquote progressive ideology is that it's really and the beef again. I always feel like we have to affirm this because the number one comeback to anyone who when you start trying to talk common sense is like, oh, you're just being sexist and you can't meow 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 meow.
In case you didn't hear him, he said you're just being sexist. Meow 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 meow. I'm going to be very clear when you quote us on that,
because most of them are fucking cat ladies. Fuck you. But no, it's like, okay, we don't want. They don't want. It's like almost an assault on like normalcy, because they want to go against the reason they have the grid girls at the Formula One is that they were engaging in the, they're there to be like sort of advertisements, and the reason why they were there to be advertisements is because you have someone who's attractive and pretty, people pay attention to them. We pay attention to people, pretty attractive people. That's what you do. That's what you're supposed to do. That is human nature. That is biology. That's everything inside you, because you're looking at someone pretty, and yes, it could be sexual in nature. It's perfectly normal. And in a capitalist society, we harness that and said, hey, you're going to be looking at this pretty lady. We're going to push our product.
Absolutely.
Perfectly fine. As far as I'm concerned, that's perfectly fine. If you could find a way to make more money, go for it. But the thing that makes this so ridiculous is that feminists, amongst this current wave of feminists, the most retarded wave, is that they're acting like they mama knows best on all women's issues. And the thing I love about this article is the women are saying, no, fuck you. We have a choice in what we want to do.
Yeah, and in the article on from the Washington Post, Michelle Westby wrote on Facebook that her experience as a grid girl helped pave the way for her entrance to the male-dominated world of stunt and drift competition driving. She also said a lot of women will lose a source of income thanks to quote unquote feminist. She goes on to say, "I'm now retired from it all, but to think girls have now lost a lot of important income because feminists think they know what is best when they haven't got a clue is really frustrating. We have our own voice. We love doing the job. This is all basically because some men can't control what comes out of their mouths and has nothing to do with girls," which I agree with the sentiment, but I cannot agree with that. Do
No.
not blame men for this bullshit.
No.
This is all on
This is
women trying to force that down.
on other women.
Yeah, so now essentially it's kind of forcing men to adhere to men. I say men because we're typically the CEOs of these large companies. It's forcing us to make those decisions in order to stay in the PC lane and not be sued and in the headlines and all that bullshit. But she goes on to say, I can walk past a building site and get the same comments, so why suddenly a job should, get the same comments, so why suddenly a job should be taken away due to some unwanted male attention is a joke. What's next? No female magazines, commercials, ... Where does it end? End quote. I completely agree with her sentiment, and this goes back to what I said earlier about if if your employer or your proposed employer says, "Hey, we want you to stand on the sidewalk, looking very good and holding a sign that says free taxes for the first 500 people," you're doing an advertisement job. And if you are okay with that, then that is between you and your employer. Because biology, sex sells.
Yeah.
Period. Point blank. We're programmed for that, and so to essentially be demonized for that kind of behavior is really shitty. Because there's also with the previous Summer Olympics, I'm sure you've seen it, LT. You have the one magazine. I'll have to go back and find it, but one magazine tweeted the female objectification is wrong and everything like that. But then they go on like a few posts later to literally objectify like swimming men or the men's swimming team, where they take pictures of the abs and packages of the swim team and they analyze them. Yeah. Like, how is that not like duplicitous?
Well, and that's the thing about this whole it's okay. So the thing with the progressive ideology and ideologues, stuff like that, the core thing about them is hypocrisy. They are the biggest hypocrites ever because they'll sit there and tell you, "Oh, this is wrong, but it's okay when we do it," and it's a load of shit. And the go back on why we say sex sells. So I remember, and this was many moons ago. This was we were doing a charity car wash, right? And you know how when people do car washes, they stand outside and they have people, have billboards like "come to our car wash" and stuff like that. Well,
yeah, they get bikinis and stuff.
Well, me being a very big, very fit, muscular black dude, I was told by one of our female members, is like, "Hey, it would help. Why don't you go out there, take your shirt off? We're gonna oil you up. We're gonna have it, hold this sign out, and I guarantee we're gonna get, we're gonna double our intake."
Yeah, you're gonna get that one weird looking trucker that's just gonna like rub his belly button and be like, "Get in there, get in there all nice and deep black."
Well, I'm sexy as hell, so that works.
Well, that's a quote from Dodgeball. I don't think it's really okay.
I know that's where it was from, but you are not taking away from my sexiness, and that's what this is all about.
Okay, as long as you get in there all nice and deep black, I got no problem with it.
But no, seriously, but that so it was a female, it was a woman who suggested we do this, and you know what? It's exactly what happened. We got more people. We had girls out there in bikini top, and they had me out there shirtless. All right. And, my big Terry Crews looking ass was out there, and we got more people because sex sells. It does. We objectify everyone objectifies everybody. If you didn't objectify anyone, we would not have the population we do because you objectify people when you want to bang them. It's just what happens. All right, doesn't mean that you don't. And the thing was, they always automatically resolve like, oh, when you objectify him, you're treating him as an object, and you don't see him as a person. A person is an object, you fucking dumb motherfucker. So it is nothing wrong. Objectification, both on men and women, is not wrong. They had this shit with the, being big gamers. There was a thing that I always found hilarious is that there was an article, was like last year, where the gamers were like, "Oh, in the new Street Fighter, the women are being objectified. Look at this, like, oh my god, objectification." So then they came out with this new costume for Rue, where he's shirtless with a beard, and he's all buffed and ripped. And they're like, then the articles was like, "Why it's okay to objectify hot Rue?" And I'm like, "You hypocritical bitches."
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's. I don't want to say it's systemic, but it's expected nowadays, and it's like it's essentially men can't be victims is really what it's teaching.
Yeah, it's the basically, yeah, and they always try to play that shit like, oh, well, you can't, they do the whole thing. You can't be racist against white people. You can't be sexist towards men. They're always trying to find a way to exclude themselves from the same behavior they're demonizing someone else for.
What? That's fucking cray-cray, dude.
Message.
That's fucking cray-cray. Oh, man. Man.
You know what the funny part about this? A lot of people, unless they actually know us, they're going to listen to this and be like, these guys are a bunch of Trump supporters. Neither one of us voted for Trump, you dumb motherfuckers.
Not even close. But let me go on a quick rant about Trump, right? Quick rant. All right. So we already said not a Trump supporter, right? But it really fucking grinds my gears, right? When I hear people that shout out, not my president. Like, yeah, bitch. He is. He's the fucking president. Like, so now all you can really do is treat him like any other president. You can not agree with what he says. That's fine. You can hold him to a higher standard, which you should. You should not demonize him for shit that you believe he's done without evidence. He's the fucking president. You need to give him that.
Again, this is one thing I talk about America and why people, when I hear Americans whining about how bad America is, I really want to like slap them in the face, because you're sitting there like, really, you're whining about this? I said, you live in a country where you can talk shit about your leaders, like openly, not even hide it.
We could have straight up protests with signs that says like Trump sucks dick.
Yeah, you could do pictures, caricatures, you could mock them on TV. And the funny thing I like about, the funny thing about this is, so, again, hypocrisy is that now everyone is doing the people on the left or the Democratic side are doing the exact same thing they used to accuse the Republicans of doing about Obama. They were like, "Oh, you're being racist. You're demonizing Obama and this, and you're going out." I was like, "You're doing the exact same thing to Trump that you did to Obama, that the other side did to Obama." I said, "We don't go any further because it's all tribal and it's a us versus them mentality." So, but you're still lucky because you're able to do that freely. You're able to make fun of people's hands and the president's penis and his ears and stuff like that, and nothing happens to you. I have literally lived in places that if you talk shit about the leadership, you will be gone. Gone. Dead serious about that. You couldn't say shit about the people in charge.
So, all right,
Americans are a bunch of whiners. That's what the bottom line to
well, because we can. But, so do you remember the my toast from earlier?
Oh, yes.
Here's to that long, straight piece in Tetris, right? Because it's always so fucking helpful. I'm going to get rid of fucking 4 or 5 fucking lines. It's going to be awesome. Well, speaking of video games, according to TheVerge.com, the organizers of the Game Developers Conference, the GDC, have rescinded plans to give the annual Pioneer Award to Atari co-founder Nolan Bushnell, after numerous game developers pointed to reports of sexually inappropriate comments and behavior by Bushnell in the early days of Atari. Although the behavior, which reportedly included provocative hot tub meetings and fostering a fraternity culture at Atari had long been documented in multiple interviews and books, it has sparked new criticism and attention in the wake of the hashtag #MeToo movement, which is bullshit. So, first of all, in the early days of Atari, LT was when?
The 70s.
What else was happening during that time?
We were coming off the sexual revolution, and we were getting into that big groove funkadelic scene.
Right. So essentially, that was like the live and let live kind of era.
That was the ages of Quaaludes, and as a matter of fact, the not only just the Quaaludes, you had the Spanish Fly. Like everyone was trying to hook up. That was the disco scene,
Right.
you know.
That's
was
like Studio 54 shit.
yeah, exactly. And to sit there and try to hold people accountable for what they did then is just freaking stupid.
Yeah. Well, that's like that is like I can't think of a good one that's like a good example, but yeah, to hold this guy accountable for something he did, what, 40, almost 50 years ago?
Yeah.
Like really, dude? Like really?
And
like,
this
like
is
it was completely 100% appropriate and acceptable at that time. At the time, like there were no reports. It was like, yeah, we had a hot tub meeting. It was great. You know.
Well, even the women that work there. So there, I mean, I don't know if this it says in this article, but I did read another article where a lot of the women that actually work there for Atari and work for Bushnell at the time were coming out and saying, "Hey, you guys didn't even reach out to us." And that's another thing I get upset with the feminists and the ideologues for, because they tend to speak for people. They tend to speak. They're offended for other people and not let the people who actually witness it, live through it, speak. So there were like several women who, worked for Atari at that time, talked about how they felt, and they were like, no, that was the environment. That was the 70s. That's how things were. And, you could grant to say, oh, well, there was still sexism and misogyny and all that back then. I was like, yeah, there probably was, and there is now, and it's never going to go away. I'm sorry. It's never ever going to go away.
Yep.
Because
men will be men and women will be women.
And even though you're going to try to tell us that men or women are the same, we know reality says otherwise. But
biology says otherwise.
Yeah.
Science, bitch.
Science. But they don't, well, it's not science when it doesn't conform to what they're trying to say.
Well, I'm trans knowledge, so I don't agree with that statement.
Well, I identify it as someone who's always right about everything.
So you're wrong. All right. So, but going on to this article on The Verge, it's essentially saying that, because of the his incidents, not even incidents, because of his behavior in the past.
That was well documented.
That's well documented, and it's just now coming out as being against the cultural norm, or what they're looking for, the against the PC. So they are not giving him the Pioneer of the Year award, which it's like saying, Neil Armstrong, we know you were the first guy to step on the moon, but you stole some bread when you were like 6. So because of that, we don't really want to give you this shit.
Yeah, and one of the things, so a person that they quoted a lot in these articles about this award is a fucking asshole piece of shit of a human being named Brianna Wu. If Brianna Wu was on fire and I had a bucket of water and a bucket of gasoline, I would pour the gasoline on, because this is a shitty human being. And this shitty human being is trying to run, for Senate and one of the districts, trying to run for government. And if this happens, I just will never return to the States, because it's all hope is lost. But Brianna Wu, besides being a very loosely termed a game developer, created one game, and one game where she sexualized all her female characters, and
I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because sex sells, and she wanted to sell a bunch of video games.
Well, and then complained about sexualized female characters. It's like, you created a game. So for those who don't know, Brianna Wu is a tranny, and yes, I said tranny. Go fuck yourself. Who started getting into video games and decided to get on the jump on the bandwagon, where the whole feminist things and how we need to change game culture to conform to us and all this. And she and I'm being very nice saying she developed this game where it's all female. They're all very sexualized, all very skinny, all very petite. You know, basically, she made a game of what she wished she could actually look like, but doesn't. And then went on a rant about how video games sexualize females. So go fuck yourself. And then another thing is that she's a lying bitch. She's a lying bitch. She got to fame and was on TVs and news reports because she said that all these misogynist gamers out there, they're targeting me and they're hating on my family. And it was like, well, what happened, Brianna? Oh, well, I just called them names and called them piss babies and made memes that made fun of them, and then they hit back. And if you don't know anything about the internet, if you hit, prepare to be hit back. And that's what happened. The internet hit back, and instead of going, "Oh fuck, I done goofed," she went and played the ever prevalent
Victim card.
Exactly. So then everyone's like, "Oh," and then she had the nerve to like do on an interview. She's like, "I was so scared I had to leave my house," and the internet, people often call it weaponized autism. They sat there, and they're like, "How?" It's like, wait a minute. These are pictures of you in your quote unquote studio, and you're doing the interview in your quote unquote studio, but you just said how you were scared and you had to leave your house. So you're scared to leave your house, but you come back to do your interview in your house?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's anything they do, or they'll say whatever they can in order to milk the most amount of victimhood they can, and that's again, it's something that I've talked about before. Of the left is constantly eating themselves, and they are just digging themselves into bigger holes because it is a competition on who can be the bigger victim.
Exactly.
And that is that's not a healthy way at all to
It's
live as a person or as to be as a society. It's not. And it's because once you start playing the victim, you're essentially trying to alleviate yourself of any kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I was the victim. I got fucking pissed drunk at this place and then passed out on the floor, and I woke up in some guy's bed. It's like, so why'd you get pissed drunk and fall asleep on the fucking floor? Like, why didn't you just go home?
Or why did you, it could even be worse than that. They're like, oh, I went out and I got pissed drunk and I woke up and someone stole my wallet. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what happens when you lose, sight of your old faculties and you make yourself a victim, a target in public. And that's, they always say, oh, the victim blaming. I don't believe. The thing I have with victim blaming is that just because you're a victim of something doesn't mean you did not play a part in it. And two, the only time I think victim blaming is wrong is when you are blaming something for someone, someone for something they had absolutely no control over, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And what I mean like that is like, I'm not going to victim blame a child for child abuse because a child generally has no control over that environment. I will blame you if you go outside and they say, hey, you might want to, wear a reflector while you're running down the street and you don't, and then you get hit by a car. I'm going to be like, hey, dumbass, didn't we just tell you not to do that and you did it anyway?
You went for a midnight run wearing all black.
Yeah, and then got hit by a car and then go, oh, I'm a victim. I'm like, no, you're an idiot. That's the difference. And and I understand things happen to people, but you also have to understand that there's also a time where people have to look back and see how they played a part. That's why I like Bill Burr's bit with the rattlesnake. He's like, why is no one? He's like, if a guy goes over and gets bit by a rattlesnake, no one sits there. People ask questions. No one just automatically go, oh, you poor baby. Everyone goes, ooh, what were you doing? Were you fucking with it? Because that implies, that lets you know if you got bit by a rattlesnake, you probably, they're going to ask you questions on how it happened. But we don't do that when it happens to, women. Yeah. And I think that's wrong. If you really want equality, if, everyone knows like equality, we want to be able to treat it the same way as a man. We want to get to what a man gets. Okay, well, you're going to have to get on the same scrutiny that men get because men fall under a lot of fucking scrutiny.
Did you hear the fucking rattle? Did you get bit after?
That's exactly what happened. How'd you, I got bit by a rattlesnake. how the fuck did you get bit by a rattlesnake?
They literally have a warning bell.
Like, what were you? Yeah, that's it. What were you doing? What did you do to get bit by a rattlesnake? Those are questions you'll ask. But you can ask that of men. But then when you ask that of women, we're considered victim blaming. I'm sorry. There are sometimes you play a part in what happens to you. Not every time, but it does happen. So, moving along, going to this thing, we're going to go to our last topic of the day, where we're going to talk about the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. And the thing about the BBC, which is really interesting and it took place over the last couple of months or so, is that a lot of women stood up and said, you know what, BBC does not pay women fairly to men because the men are making more and women are not making as much as men and yada, yada, yada. And the BBC being, the cucked institution that it is, I like that word, decided to do an audit to actually investigate and see what's going on with their pay, their pay practices and what happened. Well, here's the thing, and this is why I don't give a shit. I really don't support a lot of these movements and ideologies and these activist movement things, because what happened was the BBC did an audit. They examined their pay.
Well, let me rewind you 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
The BBC brought in 2 independent auditors.
Yes.
So this is not like this is damn near impossible bias at this point.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
The BBC didn't examine the BBC and said the BBC didn't
No.
do nothing wrong. The BBC brought in 2 outside agencies to examine them, and then those agencies still said the BBC did nothing wrong. And it said that there is no gender bias in the BBC pay practices. Now, you would sit there and think, okay, this should be a win for the women. The women cry. The women's.
They finally have a place where they have full equality in pay. And
Right.
There's no wage gap. There's no nothing. This is fucking utopia.
Well, it's not such a. We'll back up. We'll go into what they said, but the fact is that the one I want to look at is that they made it. They launched a complaint. They were heard, because the one thing that we hear all the time is you don't listen to women, when everyone listens to women. Everyone listens to women. Women, bitch, 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 and we listen to them. We don't always capitulate, but we listen because we hear it. But they made a complaint. They were heard. Action took place. When the results came back, it said, hey, there's no gender bias. And the BBC said, but we did find some discrepancies at these lower pay rates, and it actually led to more men getting raises than women. Now, feminism, as they always tell us, is that they're looking for the equality among the sexes. Men and women should be treated equal. Yeah, they say that, but in reality, that's not what happened, because what happened was, because of the audit, the results, the feminists are not happy with the results, and they're criticizing the BBC for missing the point, for listening to them, reviewing their pay practices, and finding discrepancies. Now, women are getting raises too, but more men are getting raises because they found that there was some inequality.
So what you're saying is that they found inequality in some form and corrected it. And people are still mad. Women, feminists are still mad.
Because this is not all women, and we never want to make it, because we know all women are not like this. And
No,
I usually limit feminists to a small minority, because they're more. A small minority of women consider themselves feminists because the majority don't, because they see them as, retarded. No, seriously, but they see them this way because a lot of them, they do see obstacles that they have to face. When they address them and work through them, they work to solve the problem. The feminists whine. The feminists are never satisfied. They got what they want. The BBC capitulated to them, got what they want. They got the results back, but because it didn't come back with the results that they thought it should be, they're not happy. They're not happy. When you sit there and say, "Oh, there's a gender bias," and pay, and then they do a result and they say, oh, there's no gender bias. This is from outside people. This is not an internal one. And oh, by the way, we did find some discrepancies, and we're going to pay people more in the name of equality, which led to more men getting raises. Women did too, but more men because they found that a lot of more men were being underpaid for their services, and men were taking pay cuts. Men took pay cuts. More men got raises. More men, higher pay men took pay cuts, and they're still not happy.
What?
They're still
So
not happy.
the article goes on to say, I'm going to read about probably 2 paragraphs from this article. So it says, however, rather than gender bias, the report blamed the problems on a lack of clarity and openness in the BBC, as well as the financial constraints it has operated under for the past decade, which has held back the pay of younger stars compared with older generations. Now, what that tells me is that these older generations that have been doing this for so much longer and are the staple of the BBC news and TV community or the entertainment community, they're getting paid more than the new up-and-comers who have not essentially paid their dues yet. Like, how is that any problem? Like, that is, in the military terms, if anybody can look at the pay grades for the military forces, you have enlisted, you have commissioned officers, and then you have each grade, and then you have time in service. This essentially goes into the time in service, because if you've been in 16, 20 years, you're going to be making more than the person at 5 years.
Oh yes,
and that is so to have a discrepancy with that. I completely understand that. I've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah, I should be making paid more than this kid who just got hired. Completely. Because that also, once you've been doing it for so long, you kind of evoke that trust with the producers, with the company, and things like that. Where when you retire, you're going to get that gold watch.
Yeah.
You put your work in. You paid your dues. And I feel like the age, or not the age, but I'll call it the time and service. People are gonna hate me for that, but it's like the time and service where it's like, yeah, like you've been doing this job for so long. That's why there's that discrepancy.
Yeah, because the more you do it, you brought up the military. That's a very good example of that, because you can have 2 people of the same rank, right? But they're not going to be paid the same due to time and service. Someone who's been in, 5 years at a certain grade is not going to make the same amount of someone who's been in, 6 years or 8 years, I should say, because it's every 2 years. So 8 years, and it's just you paid your dues, you get your rank, you get more money. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of institutions like that, the same way. The longer you've been there, the more you're going to get paid.
And it's essentially paying for the loyalty. You know what I'm saying? So go on to the next paragraph that I wanted to read was the BBC Women's Campaign. Apparently, that is a group of feminists that created a group, and they like to do things. I don't even want to get into it. Campaign group, which represents more than 170 presenters and producers, dismissed the report and criticized it for not properly tackling equal pay. PwC, which is one of the companies that did the audit, focused primarily on news staff and the BBC's best paid stars in entertainment and sports, such as Graham Norton, Gary Lineker, and Chris Evans were excluded. Now, I want to say that those guys, those big headliners, were excluded because this goes back to like the Hollywood pay gap argument. Is if you have an agent, if you're able to negotiate for your wage, it is your responsibility, or your agent's responsibility to get top dollar.
It's not, yeah, that's part of it too. But let's wait everything. Graham Norton,
Big dude.
So if you're just starting at the BBC and if you think you're gonna start at the BBC, even if you have 5-10 years in, and you think you should get paid as much as Graham Norton does,
You fucking cray, son.
You are fucking stupid.
Well, so I didn't really know much about Graham Norton, but I know that every time I go to my Facebook feed and I start looking at videos of celebrities on the couches getting interviewed by a talk show host, 95% of the time it's on a Graham Norton show.
Well, so again, growing up overseas, I was very well aware of Graham Norton, and yeah, he's been there for ages. I was look up his service, but the thing is, because one of the things that make this hilarious is that there was one of the women. One of their complaints was they didn't make as much as one of these top earners. And when you sit there and go, okay, well, they actually did one of the studies or one of the surveys they did is they looked at man hours worked, like how many hours did this person put in versus the other. And this woman was, complaining she didn't get paid enough, but when they did the man hours worked, he worked like twice as much as she did, and she got paid half as much as he did because she did half the work. She didn't do equal work, and she went on to complain that, one of her things, I don't want to mention that freaking cunt's name, is that she felt that women should get paid the same as men regardless of the work being done. Yes.
That's all I can do right there is just like exasperated sigh because equal pay, equal work, I'm all for that.
Yeah, you
equal
do the
pay,
same
equal
job.
work. Yeah,
you do the same job,
well,
the same responsibilities. You should get the same pay.
yeah,
Nobody is disputing that at all.
yeah.
But what's happening with a lot of this complaining is they're not doing the same job. They're not doing the same responsibilities. And then they're still complaining that I should be paid the same. And that I'm going to have an issue with. And I would have the same issue if it wasn't a woman. So to try to go like, oh, you're just doing the women. No, if a dude came up, and we've talked about, a certain coworker at one point, well, he was actually gone before I got there, that people hated, and he didn't carry the workload as everybody else. They were upset that he got the same pay because he didn't do the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean everybody has that person at work, right? I mean everybody has a coworker like that causes animosity or the slacker at work or things like that. I mean everybody has that. So regardless if it's male or female or who they are, if somebody is not putting in the work, they should not get the pay. I mean, period, point blank.
Yeah. And to sit there and try to advocate that, you should get paid the same way because, sure, you saw someone, oh, this guy, oh, he's making this amount of money. Well, I think I'm doing the same job. I should get the same pay. Well, you had a study that says you weren't doing the same job. You weren't doing the same responsibilities. You weren't working the same man hours. You didn't get the same pay. You should accept that. And the thing is, the BBC bent over backwards. This is the one thing that's so funny about this, that the BBC bent over backwards to try to appease and correct this. And then when they did so, they're still fucking bitching about it.
Well, it's because they can't be a victim at that point.
Exactly.
I feel like that's the theme of the podcast today is victimization and why it's ruining everything. Is really, because we shouldn't be talking about the victims, or any kind of victimhoods. We should be talking about the accomplishments of people. And that's always a lot more fun to talk about. Like, oh, fuck, like first episode we talked about John Young. Young, this dude did fucking everything, right? He's essentially an idol to so many people. I mean, he accomplished so much. But, he faced a lot of hardships, I mean, he did so much. You're going to face hardships. I see motivational videos all the time where, celebrities, people that other people look up to, are talking about failure is the best teacher. Well, you know why that is? Is because it gives you healthy coping mechanisms, and if you can move past those obstacles, you can succeed. And that's the way that people should learn. It shouldn't be, oh, I didn't succeed because I'm a victim, and because I'm a victim, you should just give it to me.
It also too, to add into that too, is that people don't also take into account that success is not guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed. I was listening to one podcast, or to wrap it up, was talking about, we like to push that whole narrative, don't give up on your dreams. And, he was arguing that, no, sometimes you might have to give up on your dreams because you might not be good at your dream. You might be good at something else. You know, it's like that one meme where it says, "Oh, I know God wanted me to have more in life than this. You know, God, what's my purpose in life?" And this is an accountant. He goes, "Accounting, get back to work." You know, you might be good at what you're at right now and not at the dream that you're chasing. So you have to understand and take a self-evaluation that tells you, and and accept that you may not be, you may not achieve what you want, but you should find what you're good at.
Yeah, and capitalize on that.
Exactly.
And that's a big thing. That's like a self-discovery kind of thing.
But we don't tell people that anymore. We're telling them that you if you don't get that what you want is because you're somehow oppressed, and someone's holding you back, and it's because it's either racism, misogyny, sexism, or something that's holding you back, and other than your lack of skill.
Well, that's we're gonna have to wrap it up on that fucking note, man. Like it's this has been actually a really enjoyable podcast. I feel like there's been a lot of women and feminist bashing. I won't say women. I'll say feminist bashing.
I say feminist, but I don't mind bashing feminists. I really don't. I don't want to. I want to make sure the clear distinction between bashing women and bashing feminists. All women, the majority of women, are not like that. They're very reasonable, logical, dependable, and should be recognized for the work they do. Feminists can go fuck themselves because they're a bunch of fucking man-hating, cat fucking having little bitches.
Whiny cunts, as I think my friends in the UK likes to call them.
Cunts.
I think I just sounded like an Irish Scotsman.
They're women.
I don't know how that was.
They're women and they're whamming. They're the whiners. I hate those. I hate whiners. I hate whining. No matter who it comes from.
I can actually attest to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next time.
Choose. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Dose of Offensive Gentlemen podcast. We want to hear what you got to say, so leave us a comment below and hit that like button. Also, subscribe so you can get your future DOG updates.